My name is Anna, and the day my daughter was born should have been the happiest of my life. Instead, I found myself alone in a cold hospital corridor, begging for help from the very people who swore they'd never abandon me, my own family. What they did next wasn't just neglect, it was betrayal dressed in ricé and barbecue smoke, and I knew right then they'd crossed a line I could never let them come back from. Before we dive in, tell me, where are you watching this from? Drop your city in the comments. I was still wearing the hospital bracelet, its plastic edge scratching the inside of my wrist when I typed the words. Can anyone help me? I'm alone here. I didn't expect a parade, but I thought maybe someone would answer. My sister, my mom, someone. But the reply came like a punch to the gut. A photo. My sister Kelly holding a glass of rosé at what looked like a cheerful family barbecue. Our mother smiling in the background. Beneath it, just 7 words. We're busy. You can handle it yourself. The hallway went silent. Not in reality, it was still filled with the low hum of machines and the occasional squeaky wheel of a passing gurney. But in my body and my chest, something stopped. I blinked at the screen, scrolled up, scrolled back down. As if somehow the text would change. It didn't. And just like that, the last thread holding me together snapped. I pressed call. She picked up after 2 rings, her voice breezy. Hey, Anna, what's up? What's up? My voice came out hoarse. Kelly, my baby's in intensive care. She's hooked up to tubes, monitors, machines I can't even name, and you're too busy drinking rosé. There was a pause. Then with chilling nonchalance, Kelly said, Don't guilt trip us, you've always been the dramatic one. My mouth opened, but no words came out. I mean you're strong, you'll be fine, she added like that was supposed to be comforting. I'm not strong, I whispered. I'm drowning. Kelly chuckled lightly. Anna, come on. You've always made things harder than they are. You want everyone to drop everything for you when things go wrong. It's a bit much. My hand shook. I was standing in the fluorescent-lit hallway outside the NICU, just steps from the tiny glass room where my daughter lay, motionless except for the soft rise and fall of her chest. Machines blinked and beeped in sync with her fragile rhythm. Kelly! I didn't know what I was going to say. Beg, scream, plead, but she beat me to it. I'm gonna go. We've got ribs on the grill. Let us know when the baby's better, okay? The line went dead. I stood there, phone pressed to my ear long after the call ended. Frozen. Alone. My reflection in the hospital window looked like a stranger's sallow skin, hollowed eyes, hair frizzed into a limp bun. I wanted to scream, not because she didn't show up, but because she didn't even pretend to care. Because somewhere deep down I had believed they'll come. They have to come, but they didn't. They were eating ribs, laughing, drinking rosé while my world was falling apart in the NICU. And in that sterile hallway, with pain pressing against my ribs like a vice, something inside me hardened. This was the moment I stopped believing in family. That night I couldn't sleep. The walls of the hospital seemed to lean inward with every hour. Everything smelled like antiseptic and despair. I sat curled up in the chair beside the window, legs drawn to my chest, watching the outline of downtown Chicago blur beneath a hazy gray sky. The NICU was just 1 floor below, but it might as well have been a mile away. They only let me in for brief visits between shifts, always with a nurse watching closely, always reminding me gently to go rest. Rest. How do you rest when your baby is fighting for every breath? I opened the group chat again. Read the message from Kelly. Still no reply from Mom. From anyone. The last message from Dad had been a thumbs-up emoji 2 days ago when I texted to say I'd gone into labor. I should have known then. I pulled the hospital blanket tighter over my shoulders. My body still ached from the emergency C-section, every movement was a wince. But that pain felt oddly distant now. All I could feel was the hollowness in my chest. I didn't want to cry anymore, not again. I was too tired to cry. My phone buzzed, lighting up with a soft glow in my lap. Daniel video call incoming. I hesitated. He was 12 time zones away, buried in contracts and client dinners in Singapore. He hadn't seen our daughter yet, not even through a screen. He barely knew what had happened during the birth. It all happened too fast and I hadn't wanted to scare him. But I answered anyway. His face appeared blurry, pixelated, framed by a hotel lamp, but it was his eyes that caught me. The way they instantly softened. Like he could see right through me, like he knew I'd been on the edge of falling apart. Hey! he said quietly, voice cracking just slightly. Hey, I murmured, clutching the phone like it could hold me up. I was about to head into a meeting, but he trailed off, looking closer. Anna, are you okay? That question, so simple, so rare, I shook my head and for a long second I couldn't speak. He waited. I tried calling Kelly, I finally said, staring past the camera at nothing. And I messaged everyone, I asked for help. Daniel's jaw tensed. She sent me a photo, I continued. At a barbecue, said they were too busy. And then she said I was guilt-tripping them. Silence. Daniel, my voice broke. I'm sitting here with stitches in my stomach, our daughter hooked up to machines, and they're sipping wine in someone's backyard, laughing like none of this is real. He didn't say anything for a moment, just watched me, let the silence sit. Then with quiet intensity, he said, I'll figure something out. Daniel, no, he said, more firmly this time. You won't go through this alone, Anna. I won't let you. His voice was calm, but beneath the calm I heard steel. The same steel he used in boardrooms when someone tried to walk over him, the kind that never cracked. But what can you even do? You're halfway around the world. I'll call Elaine, he said. I'll book the first ticket I can, whatever it takes. Your sister, I asked, wiping at my eyes. But she's got her own family. She'll come, he said without hesitation. She loves you, you know that. My lips trembled. Why would she come when my own sister won't? He looked at me long and hard. Because family isn't about DNA, it's about who shows up when it matters. The dam broke. I buried my face in the blanket, trying to muffle the sob that ripped out of me. I didn't want to cry on camera, but I couldn't stop it. I hadn't cried like this even during labor. This wasn't physical pain. This was something else, something deeper. Anna, Daniel said, his voice gentler now. You've been carrying all of this alone. You don't have to anymore. I couldn't respond. I just held the phone to my cheek and let myself cry, silent and shaking. On the screen, Daniel didn't say anything else. He just stayed there, still, present. His eyes never left mine. It wasn't a grand rescue. There were no heroic speeches, no promises that everything would magically be okay. But in that moment, when everything else had fallen away, his voice was the one lifeline I had. And it was enough. 15 minutes. That's all it took. 15 minutes after Daniel's call, I heard the squeak of sneakers down the hallway, hurried, uneven, purposeful. I looked up from the cracked vinyl chair just as Elaine rounded the corner, hair slightly frizzy, a sweatshirt thrown over her shoulders, and a cardboard tray of coffee cups gripped in one hand like a trophy. Where is she? She asked breathlessly. My mouth fell open. I couldn't speak. Elaine, Daniel's older sister, had driven in from Evanston at night in a downpour without being asked twice. She had a toddler at home, a full-time job, a husband just getting over a cold, but none of that stopped her. She was here. I parked illegally, she muttered, eyes scanning the hospital signs. But whatever. We'll deal with it if they tow me. I stood up on stiff legs, and suddenly she was hugging me. One arm still balancing coffee, the other wrapping around my shoulders with a kind of softness that made me melt. Oh, Anna, she whispered into my hair. Why didn't you call me first? I didn't know what to say. I didn't even realize I was crying until she pressed a wad of tissues into my hand. Daniel said it was bad, but I didn't realize. She paused, glancing toward the NICU doors. She's stable, I murmured, but they don't know how long she'll need help breathing. Elaine didn't flinch. Didn't pity me. She nodded once, like a general receiving orders, then passed me a coffee cup. Decaf, hazelnut, the only kind left at the 24-hour gas station that didn't smell like burnt despair. A watery laugh slipped from my mouth before I could stop it. We moved to the NICU window, sitting in stiff chairs that creaked under the weight of hours. The hallway was quiet now. Night shift had dulled the hospital buzz to a murmur. Inside the window, my daughter lay still under a glowing heat lamp, swaddled in wires, her chest rising and falling so slowly it felt unreal. Elaine leaned forward, hands wrapped around her coffee. She's beautiful, she said softly. I nodded, swallowing hard. I wish I could hold her, I whispered. You will. I don't feel like her mom yet. Elaine turned toward me then. You are. I looked at her, eyes wide. But what kind of mother can't even get her own family to? Stop right there, she interrupted gently. Anna, what happened to you isn't about you failing, it's about them. I looked down, fingers tightening around the coffee cup. I hesitated. I keep asking myself, why would you come, but Kelly wouldn't? Elaine didn't even blink. Because family isn't just blood, it's who shows up. The words landed hard, not like a slap, but like truth, sharp and warm and bitter at the same time. We sat there quietly, the silence between us no longer empty but solid, safe. For the first time in days, I didn't feel like I was hanging off the edge of a cliff. You don't have to talk if you don't want to, she added after a while, but I'm here as long as you need. I might fall apart at some point. I'll bring glue. I laughed again. That soft, broken kind of laugh that feels like it might stitch you back together. Elaine pulled out a second bag, clean clothes, toothbrush, even a pair of fuzzy socks. She'd thought of everything. Things my own mother never even asked about. The ache of that truth burned behind my eyes. I leaned back against the chair, letting the moment stretch. My baby, fragile and fighting in the room before us. The quiet buzz of monitors. The rhythmic beeping reminding me she was still here. And beside me, Elaine, who had shown up not with grand gestures, but with quiet, fierce kindness. That night, for the first time since the delivery, I didn't feel invisible. I wasn't healed. I wasn't okay. But I wasn't alone. And maybe that was the beginning of everything changing. It was just after sunset when I saw him, Daniel walking through the automatic hospital doors, his suitcase bumping behind him like a tired soldier returning from war. His hair was unkempt from the flight, his shirt rumpled and half untucked, but I'd never seen him look more like home. I stood up too quickly. Pain jolted through my abdomen, but I didn't care. He crossed the lobby in 3 strides, dropping the suitcase and pulling me into his arms. I didn't even have time to say his name. His warmth swallowed me whole. "I'm here," he whispered against my temple. "I'm so sorry it took me this long." I pressed my face into his shoulder and let the dam open. Again. This time the tears weren't from loneliness. They were from the sweet, aching relief of finally having someone to lean on. "Come on," he murmured after a while. "Pack a bag, we're going to my parents' place." "Daniel, you're not staying here alone one more night." He wasn't asking. I tried to argue weakly. "But what if something happens? I need to be close." He pulled back, holding my face gently. "We'll be 20 minutes away. We'll take turns coming here. We'll do shifts, but you need rest, food, real sleep, and people who actually care if you're okay." He was right, and I knew it. Still, as I folded my hospital blanket and handed off the visitor's badge, a part of me felt like I was abandoning the one thing I had left to protect, my daughter. But Daniel promised we'd be back first thing the next morning. He kissed my forehead and said, "We're not leaving her. We're just bringing you somewhere you can breathe." His parents lived in Oak Park, in a quiet house with yellow siding and wind chimes that sang softly in the breeze. I remembered visiting once years ago when Daniel and I were still dating. But stepping inside now, it felt like stepping into another world. The lights were low and warm. A fire crackled in the living room. The smell of cinnamon and something baking, banana bread, maybe, wrapped around me like a hug. His mother, Linda, was the first to reach me. She looked at me, really looked, and pulled me into her arms without hesitation. "Anna, sweetheart, you must be exhausted." I nodded, suddenly too shy to speak. She helped me into the guest room where fresh sheets and a lavender diffuser waited. I was halfway into a clean pair of pajamas when I heard soft footsteps and found her returning with a tray, soup, water, painkillers, and a warm towel for my face. "You don't have to do all this," I murmured, overwhelmed. Her voice was gentle but firm. "Of course I do, you're family, and you've been through hell." No one had said it like that before, not even me. I sat cross-legged on the bed, the tray across my lap. Every bite of soup felt like a salve on my chest. Later, as I lay under a real blanket, soft and scented with something floral, I could hear Linda in the hallway whispering to Daniel. Something about extra bottles, freezer meals, pacifiers for when the baby came home. When she came home. Not if. They believed she'd make it. And somehow their belief made it easier to believe myself. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Linda humming softly in the kitchen. Daniel was already dressed, car keys in hand. "You ready to go see our girl?" he asked. I nodded, blinking back tears. In the car, I turned to him. "Why do they care so much?" My voice was small. "They barely know me." He reached over, resting a hand on my thigh. "Because they know me, and they know I love you." I stared out the window, heart too full to speak. That night, after another long NICU visit, I found myself watching Linda as she rocked gently in the living room, humming as she folded a tiny baby onesie I hadn't seen before. She looked up and smiled. "I washed all the little things you had in the diaper bag. Figured they could use a fresh scent when your girl's ready." I sank into the couch beside her. "My mom hasn't even asked what hospital I'm in," I whispered. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she placed the folded onesie on her lap, reached over and took my hand. "Honey," she said softly, "sometimes we're born into families, and sometimes we make them." The words sank deep. Later that night, in the safety of that warm home, I stared at the ceiling above the guest bed and whispered to the darkness, "Why do they care more than my own mother?" And for the first time, I didn't cry. I simply let the question hang in the quiet air, unanswered, but no longer ignored. The house was quiet that afternoon. Daniel's parents had taken turns keeping me company since I'd moved in, gently drawing me out of my exhaustion with home-cooked meals, soft music, and warm, ordinary kindness. It felt strange, almost guilty, to feel comfort again. I sat in the living room, sunlight spilling over the carpet, my daughter's photo from the NICU open on my phone. Her cheeks were fuller now, her tiny fingers curled around the nurse's pinky. The doctors said she was improving steadily. For the first time in weeks, hope didn't feel like a cruel joke. Then my phone buzzed again, an unknown number at first, but the preview froze me in place. "Mom, your father's sick. We need help with his medication. Can you wire $500 today? No, how's the baby? No, how are you holding up?" Just a request, flat and cold. My stomach turned. I reread the message 3 times, trying to find something, anything, human between the lines. $500. The exact amount they'd refused to lend me last year when my car broke down in the middle of winter. I'd walked 3 miles in freezing wind that night to get to work. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling the familiar tug, the reflex to fix, to help, to prove I was still the good daughter. Old habits die hard. Daniel came into the room carrying 2 mugs of tea. "You okay?" I turned the phone toward him. "They want money." He looked at the screen, then at me. "After what they did, apparently Dad's sick." He sat down beside me, his hand resting gently on my knee. "Do you believe that?" I swallowed hard. "Maybe, but even if he is, I can't do it. Not like this, not after everything." He nodded slowly, giving me space to think. I set the phone on the table, face down, like it was radioactive. Every part of me wanted to justify them, to tell myself they were just desperate, that Kelly probably told them I was fine now, that they didn't understand what they'd done. But the memory of that group chat photo, Kelly's wine glass raised in the sunlight, laughter frozen mid-betrayal, flashed behind my eyes. And suddenly I saw it all clearly. They hadn't cared when I was alone. They hadn't cared when my baby was fighting for her life. But now that they needed something, they remembered I existed. The irony was almost laughable. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long moment, then I began typing. "Anna, we're busy. You can handle it yourselves." The same words, the same cruelty, reflected back like a mirror. My thumb lingered over the send button, trembling slightly. Daniel watched me, his face unreadable. "You sure?" he asked softly. "I have to be." I hit send. The message whooshed out, tiny and irreversible. I stared at the blue bubble for a long time, expecting the rush of guilt to hit me hard. But it didn't. All I felt was stillness. The kind that comes after a storm when everything finally stops shaking. The baby monitor on the table crackled with soft static from the NICU feed, my daughter's tiny breathing amplified through the speaker. The sound steadied me. Daniel leaned closer, brushing his thumb across my hand. "You did the right thing." "I just gave her a taste of what she gave me," I whispered. "And it still feels wrong. Maybe that's the difference between you and them." I looked at him, my eyes burning. "What if I never forgive them? What if that makes me like her?" He shook his head. "It makes you human." Outside, the late afternoon light turned golden, spilling through the lace curtains. The house smelled like apple pie and baby lotion, a strange combination that somehow felt like safety. I replayed Kelly's message in my head from weeks ago, that smiling photo, that cruel caption. Then I pictured my own mother reading my message now, maybe feeling that same sting. Did it make me vindictive? Maybe, but it also made me free. For the first time in my life, I wasn't scrambling to earn love that should have been freely given. I leaned back into the couch, holding Daniel's hand. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The only sound in the room was the faint, rhythmic coo of my daughter through the monitor, a tiny reminder that life, fragile and beautiful, keeps breathing forward even after betrayal. And this time, I wasn't the one waiting for someone else to show up. I had shown up for myself. I should have known she'd come. There's a certain kind of silence that settles before something breaks. That stillness you feel just before a glass shatters or a storm starts rolling in. That was the silence in the living room that morning, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of Linda's kitchen clock and the soft cooing from the baby monitor. Then, 3 sharp knocks at the front door. I was holding a bottle of warmed milk when I heard it, and every cell in my body froze. Something told me before I even looked, it's her. Linda poked her head out of the kitchen, drying her hands. Expecting someone? I shook my head slowly. My heart started pounding as I walked to the door, the bottle still clutched in my hand. When I opened it, the autumn wind rushed in, crisp and biting. And there she was. My mother stood on the porch, cheeks red not from the cold but from fury, lips pressed into a tight line. She wasn't crying. Not yet. That would come later. "I've been calling you," she said without greeting. "You blocked me." I stepped out onto the porch, letting the door close gently behind me. I didn't want this chaos entering Daniel's parents' home. "You weren't invited here," I said, quietly but firmly. She ignored that. "How could you turn your back on us like this?" she snapped, voice rising. "Your father is sick. I asked for one thing, Anna, one after everything we've done for you." That last part made me blink. Everything they'd done for me. My grip on the baby bottle tightened. "You've never even met your granddaughter," I said. That stopped her. She blinked, mouth opening slightly as if she hadn't expected the conversation to shift so quickly. "Wasn't my choice," she said quickly. "Kelly said you didn't want us at the hospital, that you told everyone to stay away." A chill spread down my spine. My voice dropped. "You were told not to come, right, by Kelly?" She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes darted to the side, lips twitching as if calculating the safest lie. I watched the truth flicker and die behind her expression. "She said." My mother started, then faltered. "She lied," I said flatly. "Maybe," she muttered. "But you were so cold on the phone, you acted like we were a burden, like we'd already failed you." I looked her straight in the eye. "You did." Silence fell between us. I hadn't meant to say it like that, so directly. But there it was, out in the air between us, thick and unmovable. "You know what I remember," I continued. "That night in the NICU, I was still bleeding, barely able to stand. I messaged the group chat because I was desperate. I said I was alone, and you sent me a picture of Kelly drinking wine." "That wasn't me," she protested. "No, but you didn't say anything either, did you?" My voice cracked. "Not even 'are you okay?' Not 'how's the baby?' Just silence, because Kelly said I didn't want you there and you believed her without question." She looked away again. Her arms folded, fingers twitching over the sleeves of her coat. "She's my daughter too, you know," she said bitterly. "I should have been there." "Then why weren't you?" That broke something. Her face crumpled, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the woman who used to brush my hair and whisper lullabies when I had night terrors. She stepped forward like she might reach for me, but I didn't move. "You have to leave," I said quietly. "This is not your house, and you don't get to walk in here just because you finally feel guilty." Tears filled her eyes, but I stood firm. "I need time," I said, "and space. If you want to be part of her life, of my life, then you start by respecting that." She hesitated, lips trembling. "Anna, please." "Go," I said, my voice now calm. "Just go." And slowly, reluctantly, she did. I watched her walk back to the car, arms folded tightly across her chest, her head down like the weight of everything we didn't say was finally starting to settle. I stayed there on the porch long after the taillights disappeared. Inside the house, the baby monitor crackled softly, a tiny breath, a faint hiccup. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, heart pounding. Daniel appeared from the hallway, eyes searching mine. "You okay?" I nodded. But what I didn't say, what I couldn't say yet, was that this time I hadn't collapsed. I hadn't folded. I had drawn a line. And no one, not even my mother, was allowed to cross it anymore. I waited until the baby was asleep. Her soft breaths puffed through the monitor like tiny waves brushing a quiet shore. Then I picked up my phone. I stared at Kelly's name for a long time, thumb hovering. For weeks, I had imagined this call in 100 different ways, screaming, crying, begging for an explanation. But now that it was real, my heart beat with something colder than rage. Resolve. I hit call. It rang twice. "Wow," Kelly answered, her tone flat. "Didn't expect to hear from you." Her voice sounded the same. Effortlessly casual, like nothing had happened. Like we were catching up over coffee, not standing on opposite sides of a broken sisterhood. "I need to ask you something," I said, my voice low, a beat of silence. "Okay," she said, guarded. "Did you tell Mom I said not to come to the hospital?" There was a pause, just long enough to tell me she knew where this was going. "I didn't lie," she said finally. "That's not what I asked." "I didn't lie," she repeated. "I just assumed. You weren't exactly welcoming anyone with open arms, Anna." I blinked. "You assumed," I repeated slowly. "And that was enough reason to tell our mother, who's never met her granddaughter, that I didn't want her around." "You were being dramatic," Kelly snapped. "You made everyone feel like they were walking on eggshells. You shut down, then blamed us for not showing up." My stomach twisted. "I begged you," I said, voice rising. "I asked for help. You sent me a photo of your barbecue." "Because you were guilt-tripping everyone," she shot back. "You always act like your problems are more important than anyone else's. I didn't want Mom getting dragged into your pity spiral." I had to sit down. My knees couldn't hold the weight of her words. "So, you lied," I said, quieter now. "Not just to her, to yourself. You didn't want to deal with me being in pain, so you made it about my attitude." There was no answer. "You looked at your phone," I whispered, "read the words, 'Can anyone help me?' and decided the ribs on your grill were more important." Still nothing. "I needed you, Kelly." I let that hang in the air. She didn't respond. "And now you've twisted the story so badly that Mom's standing on my porch blaming me for everything." I heard her exhale sharply. "Honestly, Anna, you've always made things harder than they are," she said finally. "You take everything so personally. Not everything is about you." And just like that, there it was, the final confirmation, no apology, no flicker of remorse, just the same old script. I was the problem for noticing the pain. I leaned against the baby's crib, my hand resting on its wooden edge. She was asleep, safe, breathing gently. "I'm done," I said. "We're not doing this anymore." Kelly scoffed. "Doing what?" "This," I said. "You gaslighting me, making me question what I saw, what I felt. Telling me I'm too much, too emotional, too demanding, when all I did was ask for you to be a sister." A long silence. Then she muttered, "Wow, so now I'm the villain." "No," I said evenly. "You're not the villain, you're just not who I thought you were." My hand trembled slightly as I reached to turn off the monitor volume. "You don't have to be part of her life," I said, my voice calm now. "But if you ever want to be, you'll have to start with honesty and an actual apology. Not this passive-aggressive performance." Kelly made a sound like she was about to speak, but I ended the call. My hands were shaking, but my chest felt lighter, not because it was over, but because I ended it. No one took my piece this time. I stood in the quiet nursery for a long moment, looking down at my daughter's tiny, sleeping face. Her fingers curled, her lashes fluttered. She didn't know any of this yet, but one day she would. One day I'd tell her how we got here. How I learned to stop begging for love from people who didn't know how to give it. And how I finally chose peace over guilt. Love over obligation, her over them. It had been 4 days since the call with Kelly, no response, no apology, just silence, which, ironically, felt louder than her voice ever did. I hadn't told Daniel everything, not yet. I was still carrying the weight of her words like they were stitched into my skin. But that morning, over coffee, I finally said it. She lied. She told Mom I didn't want them at the hospital. Daniel didn't even blink. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "She didn't even try to defend it, just said I was making things harder than they were." I looked down at my mug, swirling the spoon slowly. "Like always." Daniel reached across the table, resting his hand on mine. "You know who you are," he said. "You don't need them to confirm it." I nodded, but my chest still felt tight. That afternoon, while folding laundry in the living room, I glanced at my phone and saw the message again, still unread, still sitting there like a bruise. "Your father's sick. We need help with meds. Can you wire $500? No follow-up. No, are you okay?" Just need. Demand. Expectation. The old version of me would have deleted it or replied with more anger, more proof that I'd finally grown a backbone. But something in me shifted. I walked into the kitchen where Daniel was chopping vegetables for dinner. Our daughter was sleeping soundly in the bassinet nearby, one tiny fist pressed to her cheek. I stood there for a moment before asking softly, "Should we help with the medicine costs anyway?" He turned toward me slowly, knife paused midair. I could see the surprise flicker in his eyes, but not judgment. "You want to?" he asked gently. I shrugged. "Not really. But I also don't want to be the kind of person who only gives love when it's earned." He set the knife down and wiped his hands. "You're not them," he said. "You're better." I looked down, unsure. "It's not forgiveness. I'm not ready for that." He smiled slightly. "It's okay. It doesn't have to be." We sat down together at the table. The quiet hum of the refrigerator filled the space between us. Daniel opened his laptop and pulled up the bank transfer screen. "We'll do it," he said, "but on our terms, no calls, no groveling, just help, quietly." I nodded, biting the inside of my cheek. As he typed in the amount, I whispered, "What if they never change?" He looked at me then, really looked. "Then they'll never change, but you won't have to wonder who you are anymore." And that somehow felt like the real victory. We clicked send. No text, no note, just the act itself, clean, deliberate, and free from the tangled web of guilt. Afterward, I sat by the window, the light growing dim across the backyard. I held my daughter in my arms, her little body warm and safe against my chest. I thought about how often I'd chased people who let me down. How many nights I'd spent trying to earn love that was supposed to be unconditional. But this moment was the quiet opposite of that. This was love without performance, compassion without cost, boundaries without cruelty. I didn't know what they would do with the money. I didn't know if it would fix anything. But it didn't have to. It wasn't for them. It was for me, for her. So she could grow up knowing that kindness wasn't weakness and that real strength often speaks in whispers, not screams. The envelope looked harmless enough. Cream-colored, thin, slid casually into the day's mail like it belonged there. No return address, just my name written in my mother's careful cursive. I stared at it for a full minute before touching it. There was no letter inside. Just a small, folded card. One sentence handwritten in blue ink. "Family dinner this Sunday, hope to see you." No explanation, no apology, just a quiet summons as if the past few weeks had been a misunderstanding, not a storm. I stood in the kitchen holding it, the card trembling slightly in my fingers. Daniel was feeding the baby, bouncing her gently in the crook of his arm. He glanced over when he saw my face. "What is it?" he asked. I handed him the card. He read it, brows furrowing. Then he looked up at me with that steady calm I'd come to count on. "They're not even pretending it didn't happen," I said, voice hollow. "Nope. No context, no emotion, just dinner." He nodded slowly. "You want to go?" The question surprised me. I expected him to scoff, to tell me I owed them nothing, that I was right to delete it. But instead, he asked like it was my choice, like I was allowed to decide on my terms. "I don't know," I said honestly. "It feels like a trap." "Maybe," he said, adjusting the baby's bottle. "But maybe it's also a test." I tilted my head. "A test for them," he added. "Not for you." We were quiet for a long time after that. That night, after the baby was asleep and the house was quiet, I sat with the invitation again. The words stared back at me, strangely weightless for something that carried so much history. Could I go back there? Could I walk into that house with my head held high, knowing everything they didn't say and everything they still might never say? The next morning, I called Daniel while he was at work. "I think I'm going to go," I said softly. He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. Instead, he said, "Then we go together." That one word melted something in me. Sunday came faster than I expected. We dressed the baby in a soft yellow dress. Linda had ironed it the night before, her hands trembling a little as she folded it like something sacred. "You deserve to be seen," she'd told me. As we pulled into my parents' driveway, I realized I hadn't been there in months. Not since before the pregnancy. The yard looked smaller somehow, the shrubs more brittle. Familiar, but off like a photograph left too long in the sun. Daniel parked the car and turned to me. "You sure?" he asked. I looked down at my daughter, asleep in her car seat, tiny fingers curled like punctuation marks. "Yes," I said. I need them to see us, all of us. He carried the baby. I carried the weight. The porch creaked under our feet. I knocked once, sharper than I meant to. The door opened. My mother stood there wearing a soft pink cardigan and a tight, uncertain smile. Her eyes flickered from me to Daniel, then to the baby. "I'm glad you came," she said quickly, stepping aside. I didn't reply. The house smelled like roast chicken and lemon, like memory. The table was already set, too many forks for the number of people who had ever stayed seated. My father was in the living room, thinner than I remembered, his hands trembling slightly as he stood. "Anna," he said, voice raspy, "you made it." Daniel nodded politely. I kept my eyes on the baby, adjusting her blanket even though it didn't need adjusting. No one said a word about what had happened. Not yet. We sat down to eat, the clinking of utensils louder than any conversation. But beneath it all, there was a low thrum of tension, buzzing just under the surface. Like the truth was waiting behind someone's teeth, aching to be set loose. And deep down, I knew this dinner wasn't about food. It was a reckoning waiting to happen. The fork barely made it to my mouth. Every bite of food felt like a test. Could I swallow this roast chicken with the weight of betrayal lodged in my throat? Small talk buzzed around the table, awkward and forced. My mother complimented the baby's dress. My father asked Daniel about work. No one looked directly at me. And Kelly sat across from me, her eyes flicking between her wine glass and her phone like she might teleport out of this meal if she stared hard enough. I said nothing. I let them squirm. Daniel reached under the table, gently squeezing my knee. A quiet reminder, you're not alone. Halfway through dinner, the room shifted. It was my father who broke the silence. He set down his fork and looked at me, really looked, for the first time in what felt like years. His face was pale, thinner than I remembered, but his voice was steady. "Kelly told us you banned us from coming." The words landed like a slap, not a scream. Just flat truth dropped into the center of the table. I turned to him, my voice barely above a whisper. "That's a lie. I begged for help." The room went still. All the ambient noise, the clinking of glasses, the faint hum of the oven seemed to vanish. My mother looked up sharply. Her eyes darted to Kelly, who suddenly looked very, very small. I just thought it was best," Kelly stammered. Her voice cracked under the weight of everyone's eyes. "You were upset. You weren't thinking straight." "You thought," I repeated, my voice low, cold. "So you took my grief, my panic, and decided to rewrite it?" Kelly opened her mouth, closed it again. "I reached out to you," I said, staring directly at her. "I messaged everyone, I called you, and you what? You showed Mom a picture of a barbecue and called it love." She dropped her gaze. My mother's face crumbled. She looked between us, her lip trembling. "I wanted to see her so badly," she whispered. "I believed Kelly because I thought maybe I failed you, maybe you didn't want us there." I laughed, sharp, dry. "You did fail me." Tears filled her eyes. "I didn't know." You didn't ask," I said. "You never asked." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was loud, full, a silence thick with truth that had finally found its voice. Across the table, my father reached out, placing a weathered hand over mine. His eyes were glassy, his voice soft. "I'm sorry, baby girl." It was the first time he'd called me that since I was 15. He turned toward the baby who had just stirred in Daniel's arms. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "Looks just like you did when you were born." I swallowed the lump in my throat. The tension cracked, not like an explosion, but like ice breaking under the first rays of spring. No dramatic apology from Kelly, no embrace from my mother, but a shift, a truth unearthed. They knew now, and they couldn't unknow it. No one moved. Kelly sat frozen, her eyes fixed on a spot somewhere near her untouched plate. My mother looked at her, then at me, then at the baby, her lips parted like she was holding back a scream or a sob. I stayed still. Not because I was waiting for them to speak, but because for the first time I wanted them to sit with the discomfort, to feel the silence they had left me drowning in for weeks. My father's hand was still resting gently on mine, weathered and sincere. My mother broke first. A tear rolled down her cheek, slow and uncertain. "I wanted to see her so badly," she whispered again, this time to no one in particular. "When Kelly said you didn't want us, I thought maybe I deserved that. Maybe I had already lost you." "You didn't lose me," I said evenly. "You gave me away. When I needed you most, you let someone else speak for me, and then you chose to believe her without ever asking me if it was true. She blinked at me as if I'd spoken in another language. You say you thought you failed me, I said. You did. The words didn't come from a place of vengeance. They weren't meant to wound, they were just true. I lay in a hospital bed alone, I continued. My daughter was in intensive care, and I was surrounded by strangers who showed more compassion than my own family. You were less than an hour away, and you never came. My mother's shoulders crumpled. She looked down at her lap, nodding slowly, the tears coming freely now. I was afraid, she murmured. I thought you hated me. I thought I'd already done too much damage. You had, I said quietly, but that didn't stop me from calling. Daniel shifted beside me, cradling the baby. Our daughter blinked up at the ceiling light, then yawned, oblivious to the years of weight crashing down around her. I turned to my mother, locking eyes. I'm not here because I want things to go back to how they were, I said. I'm here because I need you to see what you missed, who you missed. I nodded toward the baby. This is your granddaughter, and you were almost a stranger to her forever. My mother's lip quivered. I want to know her, she said softly. If you'll let me. I sat with that for a moment. Then I said the only thing I could truthfully offer. Show up. She blinked. What? That's all I'm asking now, I said. Don't send messages, don't assume, don't hide behind someone else's version of the truth, just show up. Not when it's convenient, not when you're comfortable, when it matters. Another tear slipped down her cheek. She nodded slowly. Across the table, my father squeezed my hand. We can do that, he said. We will. For the first time, I believed him. And as I sat there, watching the way my mother now looked at the baby, quiet, reverent, afraid to even breathe too loud, I realized something. This wasn't victory. This was reclamation. Of my voice, of my boundaries, of the family I was finally starting to choose, not inherit. The silence that followed wasn't painful. It was sacred. The next visit came quietly. No dramatic announcement. No emotional phone call. Just a knock at the door one Saturday afternoon, softer this time, almost hesitant. Daniel was rocking the baby in the living room while I folded laundry on the couch. He raised an eyebrow. I stood, brushing lint from my jeans. When I opened the door, my parents stood side by side on the porch. My mother held a colorful cloth bag with a rattle peeking out the top. My father carried a photo album under his arm and a box tucked neatly into the crook of the other. They looked nervous. Is this a bad time? My mother asked. I stared at them for a beat too long. They shifted uncomfortably under my gaze. Then I stepped aside. Come in, I said. Inside, the atmosphere stayed light, but the air was charged, like everyone was holding their breath. My father walked slowly into the nursery, where Daniel had just laid our daughter down for her nap. He peered through the crib bars, his face softening as he watched her tiny chest rise and fall. She's grown already, he whispered. Daniel nodded. She changes every day. My mother lingered in the doorway, uncertain, until I motioned for her to follow. She stepped into the nursery, cradling the bag in her arms like it was something breakable. I brought some toys, she said, and a blanket I crocheted a long time ago. I saved it, thought maybe one day I'd give it to a grandchild. Her voice cracked on the last word. I reached into the bag and pulled out the blanket. It was pale green, soft and worn at the edges with tiny, uneven stitches that made it feel handmade in the most intimate way. I held it up to the light. It's beautiful. She blinked rapidly. I wasn't sure if you'd want it. I folded it gently and laid it over the edge of the crib. Thank you, I said. She exhaled and something in her posture softened. We all ended up in the living room again, Daniel quietly retreating to the kitchen to give us space. My father opened the photo album on his lap, flipping through images of my childhood, me in overalls at age 4, hugging a stuffed lion. My kindergarten class photo. My 8th birthday, cheeks smeared with cake. I hadn't seen these pictures in years. He handed the album to me. We thought maybe one day you'd want to show her who you were, he said. I stared at the photos. My fingers brushed across younger versions of myself, so familiar and yet impossibly far away. Thank you, I said again, but this time it came from deeper. We didn't talk about the past, not in detail, not yet, but they stayed for hours. They changed a diaper, rocked her after a nap, held her hand during tummy time. My mother made small jokes, my father read softly from a board book. They weren't perfect. but they were present, and it wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about effort, about choosing to participate in a life they nearly lost access to. Daniel and I exchanged glances across the room more than once, those small looks that say everything without words. You see this, right? It's real. That night after they left, I sat in the rocking chair beside the crib, the green blanket draped over my knees. The house was still, peaceful. Daniel knelt beside me and leaned his head on my arm. "They're trying," he said. "I know. Does it help?" I looked at our daughter, sleeping with her mouth slightly open, one fist resting against her cheek. "It does," I whispered. "It's not everything, but it's something." It was 2 weeks later, on a gray Sunday afternoon, when Kelly knocked on my door, no warning. I saw her through the window first, hair tucked behind her ears, arms wrapped tightly around a small cardboard box. Her eyes were red. Her jacket was too thin for the chill. I hesitated. Daniel stood behind me. "Want me to send her away?" I shook my head slowly. "No, I'll do it." When I opened the door, she blinked like she wasn't sure I'd really come. "Hey," she said, her voice soft. "Can I come in?" I stepped outside instead, pulling the door almost shut behind me. She glanced past me toward the living room. I didn't come to fight." I folded my arms. "Then why are you here?" Kelly looked down at the box in her hands. "I found these," she said. "A few of the baby clothes I bought when I first heard you were pregnant. I never gave them to you, I don't know why." She handed it to me. The box was light. Inside were a few onesies, still with tags, a tiny knitted hat, and a note with my name scribbled at the top, but never finished. I stared at it, then looked up at her. "I was jealous," Kelly said suddenly, like the words had been burning a hole in her chest. "You had everything I wanted, love, a family that shows up, a partner who'd drop anything for you. I couldn't stand it." She shook her head, wiping under her eyes. "You always seemed stronger than me, Anna, and I hated you for it." The wind picked up, rustling the paper in the box. I could have said 1,000 things. Could have flung every hurt back at her, thrown her words in her face. But instead, I did what she never had the grace to do until now. I stood in the silence. "I forgive you," I said, voice low. Her eyes snapped to mine. "But I won't forget." She nodded slowly. "I know. I have boundaries now," I continued. "And if you want to be in my life, in her life, it won't be on guilt or history or blood. It'll be on effort, truth, and showing up." Kelly's face crumpled. "I don't know if I can be that kind of person." "You weren't," I said, "but maybe you could be." I looked down at the box, at the clothes she never gave, the note she never finished. "Thank you for bringing this," I said. She nodded and stepped back. "I won't bother you," she said quietly. "Not unless I'm ready to do better." And with that, she turned and walked down the steps, disappearing into the cold November afternoon. I went back inside, cradling the box. Daniel met my eyes. "How'd it go?" I smiled faintly. She didn't pretend. And neither did I. He kissed the top of my head and wrapped an arm around me. In the living room, our daughter laughed in her sleep, as if dreaming of a world that still believed in healing, even if it comes slowly.